wife. I enjoy sitting down with both of you, but it was nice. And then for you to come 2 days later is cool. So what's been happening, man? What's going on? I just clicked the live button. It's gonna take a couple of minutes.
No, yeah.
Turn this off. Uh, yeah, I saw you were doing another excursion, I guess, or it's a course. Does that course require they go to the outback?
The outback.
I mean, well,
Go
what I
bush.
mean, the bush.
Yeah. The outback in Australia is a beautiful place. Um, it's just
Now, the
like,
bush and the bush and the outback is two different things, right? The
yeah,
bush is the bush and like the forest, and then the outback is the more deserty type, the red dirt and all that.
yeah. And it's really it's a fascinating place to dive into. Like, there's so much harshness to it, but it's a
Yeah.
bit like around Sedona. But Sedona for me is more, um, it's 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 softer energy than the Australian outback. The Australian outback's got really hard energy.
I just,
Um,
I mean, I've been to Sedona. I haven't been to the outback, but Sedona, if it's harder than Sedona, it must be a very special place. That's all I can say.
yeah,
Must be.
but yeah, the bush around here, man, is like it's next level. It's so lush. It's rainforest. Yeah, it's so beautiful. You can connect easily into the feminine when you go bush around here.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, trees are special, mind you. Trees in the outback, they don't. There's a special tree called the gidgee tree, and if you cut it in half, the rings that you'd normally understand the age of a tree don't work the same out there. They only develop another ring on a good season. So you like every 7 years, say you might have a good season. So it takes 7 years to grow a ring. So you might cut it in half and think, oh, this tree's only 100 years old, but really, no, it's way over 100 years old.
Wow.
It's been there so way before white man ever touched this land, and everything, because it just has it like the Australian outback, like even the kangaroo, like the kangaroo as a being and a mother has the ability to slow down the germination rate of embryos within her womb,
Wow.
and so she can have a joey at foot in the pouch and then in her womb, and she'll slow down rates to depend on the environment so that she can be the best mother she possibly can. It's
That's
like,
wild.
yeah, no, they're just next level, and people get upset about kangaroos. Kangaroos are so amazing, and the energy around them, especially the grey kangaroo, is about endurance, and the ability to endure cycles.
Wow. That'd be a hell of an animal totem.
Yeah, and they
To,
can't go backwards. It's the two animals on the Australian coat of arms, the emu and the kangaroo, both native to Australia. Their knee construct or structure doesn't allow them to go backwards. Interestingly enough, they face off against each other though. so, so it's like two energies coming together and hopefully going up or some direction, but quite regularly they just come together for
I was
decimation.
amazed. I saw that video, or I saw it's on one of those reels where the guy's got a kangaroo in a pen and he's feeding the kangaroo, and the kangaroo's got his arms up like this, like I
Oh
guess
yeah,
they're
yeah,
just, and you can see the muscles in the kangaroo, like
yeah, yeah.
they're huge, man.
That was a red kangaroo.
A red kangaroo.
Kirsty's
So
just
there's
saying,
red
Kirsty
kangaroos and
reckons.
huh?
Kirsty's just walked in and thinks you're talking about her muscles.
Oh.
Yeah, said no. It's
But so there's a red kangaroo and a gray kangaroo.
yeah,
I didn't know
yeah.
that.
And the red kangaroos get bigger. My greys, like I've almost accidentally walked into a bull's. They call them bull, and when they stand up and go back onto their tail and right up on their hind legs, they'll like I'm just under 6 foot, and they'll stand above me, and I was accidentally almost walked into his chest. And they can be dangerous because what they'll do is they lean back on their tail and they'll just pound you with their big legs. Um,
So
but
they can
yeah,
balance on their tail and pound you with their legs.
Yeah, yeah. They
Holy
can be quite
shit, they could
dangerous. Yeah.
crush your chest, man.
Yeah.
I mean, if their arms look like what I've seen, their legs must be just, they could probably like leg press like 600 pounds or something.
But they're beautiful animals. Like when
Yeah.
you're around them and they're just moving in their pack and everything like that, and the way they glide across the countryside and like across fences and things like that, when they just bounce, just like yeah, really beautiful to watch them go.
So the kangaroo and emu are only in Australia?
Yeah,
Is
I
that
don't
right?
believe they're anywhere else in the world. They're native to Australia.
So New Zealand doesn't have kangaroo. I mean, natural kangaroos or.
No.
Oh, I didn't know that. How
They might
trippy.
have wallabies. I don't know in New Zealand.
That's trippy though, to have something that prominent in one land on one landmass. Like that's just like wow. It's almost like like I don't know, like it was just in its own like an island in and of itself. I guess in a way it is. It's like almost
Yeah.
like no cross breeding, no cross, interaction. Amazing.
It's fascinating the separation of because this island mass used to be called Gondwana land when the continental drift started to occur, and Tasmania, which had a slightly different, I say slightly, probably predominantly different indigenous presence. They held fire very differently to mainland Aboriginals. They had a number of other cultural nuances which weren't the same as the mainland. That with fire, they would hold a fire stick, and that one person was like the custodian of fire, and they would have the fire stick would obviously always have embers on it, and they would then light their fire from there. So it was a big dishonor if the fire stick ever went out because they had to go to another tribe or another clan to ignite their fire stick again. And yeah, the way the symbolism of fire was really quite distinctly different, say, to mainland Australia. But there is anthropologists have found that cultural similarities between Tasmanian Aborigines and a Indian indigenous group on the Indian subcontinent down towards the southern part of India. There's extreme similarities in culture, which they're suspecting because of the separation of the subcontinent and Australia in that way. It could actually mean that these people existed before the continent separated, and their underlying cultures remain the same, and that's like
That's wild.
yeah,
That's
you're
wild.
talking over 80,000 years.
It's just wild that. Well, let me ask you this first: does Tasmania have kangaroos?
Does Tasmania have kangaroos?
I
I've never
wonder.
seen them when I've been down there.
Yeah,
Thanks, gorgeous.
that's
I just got
trippy.
given a coffee and I got a love heart on top of the coffee.
Oh,
My daughter.
Oh, there you go.
So, yeah,
No,
I've actually never
it's just
seen them down there.
crazy because, like, you see, in the Grand Canyon, in the Sedona area, you see cave writings or what I don't know what you call these things, hieroglyphics, pyroglyph, whatever they call them, and there's this obvious Egyptian, link. And then if you get into some of the anthropology, like everybody knows, I love Robert Sepper, but there's a lot of evidence of the same peoples populating, um, other parts of the world that have a, just an amazing um, um, similarity, or they're just alike, to the Egyptian culture.
Morgan's just answered your question. Tasmania only has wallabies. Yeah, thought that might
Yeah,
be the case.
so Tasmania is really like a separate kind of entity, just as Australia has just kangaroos, nobody else has them. That's trippy.
Tasmania is an amazing place. So often, interestingly enough, it has an extremely high proportion of utilization of antidepressant and antipsychotic medication. comparative to the rest of Australia. Their level of adverse mental condition is next level compared to the rest of Australia.
Wow.
It's got an incredible history with not only white settlement but trauma that's held on the island. And Aboriginals will tell you that trauma is held in the land, and so part of healing has to be done with the land, and they'll call them song lines or ley lines or energy lines. It depends on what language you use, but they call them song lines because they will walk a song line and they will literally feel the vibration of the song, and they'll feel schisms in the vibration, and they'll know that that has to be either healed or it's the energy telling them. And so they might be told to move, say, 3,000 kilometers, and they'll move until 2,990 kilometers. And unless that song line is open and the spirits are saying you're right to move to the final 10 kilometers, they might have traveled all this time, but they won't move the last 10 kilometers until the energy line allows them to actually move. They are seriously next level. Now in Byron Bay, we're on the major song line across from Monkey Mire in the west coast of Australia, right across. It doesn't go through Yulara or Uluru or Ayers Rock, as people know. It's a very, very special place, but actually it's about 200 kilometres south of Ayers Rock. It goes through to a place called Wilpanya Pound, which is an extremely sacred place, and it's probably good that a lot of people don't know about it because of what we've done to Ayers Rock and Yulara, commercialised it. But so like I'm on a really, really strong songline. I had a friend from the United Kingdom was having dinner with us 2 nights ago, and she was just saying it's turned all her stuff up. She's grieving her mother. She's had a lot of turbulence in her life, and it's just it's just exacerbated everything she's going through. And this land does that. And especially if you hit a song line, it turns like your life up on steroids. And anyone who's been to Sedona with all the vortices and everything.
Well, that's what I was going to say. You're saying that Sedona is a softer version. I'm like, I'm not doubting you. I'm just thinking, holy crap, when I walk that land. So these people that walk the song line and sing, I guess it's like a collaboration or some kind of communion with the song line and the land. Is it just the indigenous, or have non-indigenous learned how to do it?
Yeah, well, anyone can learn. It's just the Spanish speak Spanish really, really well. So if you're going to learn Spanish, then quite regularly it's best to learn off a Spaniard. But someone who knows English and then learns Spanish, because of their understanding of English and the nuances behind the English language, can pick up nuances that the Spaniard doesn't even realize are in their language, because it's just part of them. It's like asking a fish about water. They don't know about water because that is their reality. The only reality is water. Whereas you ask someone who's a mammal, then they can look at the water and they see the distinction. A fish doesn't see distinction. So the point about this is it's like intuition and stuff we've talked about before. It's open to anyone who's willing to open themselves to feel, and particularly to feel. But my discussion with a lot of Indigenous people here, and like I don't shy away from these discussions anymore, because a lot of people won't have them because they say we need to be respectful. I think that's often people will use respect as a feint for they're actually shamed and feeling guilty about a lot of things. So I'm just going to be respectful and not actually go into this discussion. I'm past that now. So I see an opportunity to build something massive right now in Australia. I don't believe in a thing called reconciliation because of the etymology or the genesis of the word. To reconcile is to take someone back to an agreement before the turbulence has started. We had no agreement from white Australia and Indigenous Australia. There was no previous agreement. So we can't go back to anything, but that's beautiful and such an opportunity. We need to move forward. It takes it takes all, not just white, it takes all race, color, and creed to open ourselves to the land which we now occupy, and or we not so much occupy, but we're with. And the Indigenous brethren here have, the ones that are still connected, have so much knowledge about how to actually be part of the land. And
Right.
if you take like a baby will put everything around there in the natural environment. They'll put it into their mouth because their tonsils are part of their immune system, and their tonsils will assimilate their environment. And what we don't realize is what the body is actually doing is it's actually merging with its environment. So you're not becoming immune to anything. You're actually becoming one with everything. And
Yeah.
very soon, science already is in part, but the mainstream science are the ones that people are listening to. Remember, there's a whole, you can't just say science. It makes no sense. But there are disciplines of science which are shedding light on this already. And so if you then extrapolate that to us as a culture and as a people, then what we do is we become literally part of our environment, instead of the mental construct, which is I need to level my environment and construct something new.
Right.
Even think about personal development. I need to level my life and I'm going to construct my life from here. Or the other way to realize is I surrender into my life and I become one with life.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so there I'm merging my will with divine will.
That's what I've always kind of understood in my own right, is merging free will with universal will. Like, I don't even know what that means. Like what you just said, it kind of reminded me of it. But this thing about merging, which we just so happen to be doing a merging event, I think in 2 days, Saturday here and Sunday in the Southern Hemisphere. But this is like something very ancient in terms of, like, just speaking of the realm. I remember when I met Morgan, and she introduced me to conscious merging, like from the get go. And I just, was reflecting on, because it was 2015, late 2015. So I'd been kind of engaging people for about 2.5, 3 years on the internet, had a laptop and such. And I started to reflect. I thought, we're merging all the time, or at least given the opportunity to merge. If I go down the street, to buy a coffee at the corner store, I'm really given an opportunity to merge with that clerk. Or I can just keep my distance, kind of thing. But like what you're talking about, if you take it beyond people, then, and the way you kind of like draw the analogy or the comparison of how that actually works with, it works the same. So, like, for example, you're talking about the outback. And I had a question like, do they have those things everywhere? And our friend Sandra put up that Cheyenne Mountain in Colorado has multiple ley lines that run through there. She had sent some pictures from there. But I remember being in New York City in 2016 and having been, interacting and communing in nature for 6 years. That was really my day in, day out thing, right? Spirit walking around nature. And so I go to New York City, and of course, there's 3 trees for every 10 blocks or something, right? So I ended up getting on I had to start riding the subway. And I was with a friend who was, I guess, a high frequency. We all have, some high frequencies and some that are not, as high. But I was kind of amazed because we get onto the subway and he's carrying that, that waterless soap, right?
Yeah.
And he's doing his hands like this, and he's here. You want something? I'm like, no, 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 no. And I just knew, like, don't. And then as I was writing more and more on my own, I realized every time I grab one of those poles, you can feel the oil that comes off of people's skin and such. And I just knew, I guess at the time, it was some kind of initiation. And I was like, wait a minute. I can't be like, repelled by this. I can't be like avoiding this. I'm being given an opportunity to actually merge with the germs. And so it was, and I know it sounds a bit strange because it's not a natural environment, but something happened to me in those 4 months in New York City. It wasn't just the subway poles. It was the entirety of it. it could be me. I remember walking a friend home one night, and this would have been like midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, and I had been going through these exercises, right, daily, just moving around New York City, and these 4 or 5 dudes got behind me. I was going by Yankee Stadium, which is in an older neighborhood, and these 4 dudes get behind me, and I thought, wow, and because then the intel came in like apply the same thing. So instead of moving away, I didn't like turn around and say, hey, what's up? I just went, I'm just going to stop. I had a beer, open this beer, just let this thing happen, whatever's going to happen. But that whole thing that you're talking about, like the singing on the ley lines, the merging, like with the baby, in the body and the immunity, the immune system, I think it applies everywhere. Because I always feel like oneness is oneness. There's no exceptions. So eventually, whether it's now or later, I'm going to have to be one with you, or whatever else it is. Yeah. And the other thing you bring up about the whole indigenous and Aboriginal thing, like I don't know how to say this, but like I ran into this a lot in Sedona, and I'm sure, and you can kind of relate to this. I understand the history. Like it's not hard for people to really, you'd have to be stupid not to tap into what happened. 60 million indigenous Americans get wiped out. Of course, the Aborigines and so many other places around the world that are less known and some known as much. But they do carry something. They carry something, and a lot of it's oral history, but it's also practices and so on. But they also carry the same things we carry, which is, sadness and pain and suffering and the desire to have true justice and unity and oneness. And I just noticed how when I was in Sedona and I was at this one specific conference, that there had many Native American speakers in the depth of the pain. And, you used the word reconciliation. I was like in the same boat. I was going, how can I attend to this? How can I not go overboard, in the sorrow and the sadness? How can I actually, because I also see in this mirror, this incredible wisdom that's been passed down for generation. But I think, again, it's kind of a emerging thing.
It is. It brings up two things in your conversation there came up for me. One was justice and one is conflict. When 2016, I went to the World Indigenous Suicide Prevention Conference. Now, as a whole, I know people would suggest that I do a lot of work in suicide prevention. I don't. Not in the lexicon of the Western mind of what suicide prevention is, because most suicide prevention in the Western mind is actually interventional. True suicide prevention is helping a person understand who they are, connecting to spirit in their own way, and then taking themselves into an outward expression of being service within the divine realm. And when you do that, and I've used certain language to describe that at the moment, I can put that in anything psychological speak. In other words, I understand who I really am and I act from that place. You can put that into spiritual speak. You can put that into religious speak. It doesn't matter what category you're actually attempting to, a perspective. It's all the same thing. I don't go to these conferences normally, but when I heard it was in the world, I said, I'm there. And it so happened that I'd just been asked to speak on a New Zealand radio too. So they were flying me over for the weekend. And so this conference literally for going on radio. So it all worked out beautifully.
Is it me or him? I think it's him. Let me check. He'll come back. Let's see.
Doing so much work in post-traumatic stress, and you got me?
Yeah, you came back. You went into.
No, sorry.
No. You it just. Yeah, go ahead. Can you hear me?
So I was over
Yeah.
there, and yeah, I got you.
Okay.
And one of the things that I noticed over the 3 days was this pain. And then it was suggested that they draft a document of 10 statements about moving forward, and everyone agrees to this document. Now, I read the 10 statements, and it was all about the external world. It's all about what everyone else had to do. Now, if I had have been in guilt and shame and therefore hiding behind respect as a white man, it was like, I can't comment because I'm not Indigenous.
Right.
But instead, as being one with the group, I realized I want to comment and gift something. So I suggested an extra stanza, which was, and we commit to continually doing the inner work and working on ourselves so that we gift the world the most pure version of everything. And that stanza got put to the forum, 700 odd, and was unanimously agreed to be part of the end document. Because even that, they had such beautiful intent, but at the same time, they were continually focusing on the trials, tribulations, and trauma, which had been affected from the external instead of owning it.
See, that's what I was talking about, and I didn't verbalize it, but I just want to make that comment. That's what I was talking about, and you just put it into words. There was an externalization that was perpetuating, in my mind, this sadness, this grief, this anger, the suffering, and what you just said was what I was looking for. Thank you.
There's 2 aspects to go back to: conflict and justice. Justice is so often, if you externalize justice, you misunderstand it. Justice is about energy recalibration and rebalance. And it will naturally, if you push for external blame, then shame and guilt rule external blame. And the energy can never be allowed to move back to a harmonic. It will always be turbulent. There will always be resentment, anger, frustration, shame, guilt, sadness, fear. All that will be harbored if you're externalizing justice. Justice is about energy being rebalanced. And so it's not like Hammurabi's code, an eye for an eye. In my humble opinion, the tablets which were discovered in, I think, about 1907 in an archaeological dig, we are looking through 1907 eyes at something 6,000 years old. Actually, I don't know if it's 6,000, but very, very old, thousands of years old, and putting a modern mind on something in which I don't necessarily know if we completely understand. But what that Hammurabi's code, an eye for an eye, has been then used for a judicial system, which is you hit me, therefore I can hit you. That's not energy rebalance.
Right.
And a great example is North American Indians and Indian giving. Like when I was a kid, I was told that Indian giving was bad, but and please, to any North American Indian, excuse my interpretation, but I believe I understand the beauty of it. If I give you something, I give it to you with an energetic intention. And it is in receiving this gift that I'm giving you. So there's responsibility in receiving this gift. I must align with the energy and the intention that has been given through this gift to me, and I must use that gift in the appropriate way. If I use it inappropriately, the person giving me has the responsibility to take it back because there's a violation of the energy. So I must take it back from you. Or if you no longer need that energy that the gift holds, then it comes back to the giver so that it can be passed on to another person that needs this energy. And so I have a chainsaw that that was given as a younger man by my mum, and it's a smaller chainsaw. Now I've upgraded because I do bigger work, and that chainsaw I still have though, and I've given it to 2 people so far that it's their first chainsaw, and it's a great chainsaw to learn on. But once they're done, I ask for it back so that I can give it on to someone, or for them, if they upgrade, to give it on to someone as well. And then it's that energy of what that chainsaw can bring, like around a fire and everything like that, that can move on. So justice is all about that. The other thing I wanted to say about conflict, which justice and conflict are so linked, conflict occurs where attachment is present.
Right.
So where attachment happens to something or some way of life, some paradigm, something, this is my phone, you can't have it, then there's going to be conflict. But if I don't own this, if I just know that it's here for me to utilize to talk to people, and it's here, it's to connect. This thing is about connection. And interestingly enough, look at there's a black screen, yeah? It's the same as scrying. The people who know about magic and scrying discs and scrying crystals, it's the same type of thing, an obsidian viewing glass. And how much time do people spend viewing into this thing? But anyway, that's an aside tangent, sorry. It's here for communication. So if a person comes in and needs to make a phone call, yeah, cool, use my phone, because that's what it's for. No, you can't use my phone because that's my phone. There's conflict. Yeah, there's a very simple thing, but it goes up from that simple analogy to, if someone possesses me, then if I am possessed by someone, if someone else comes in to be in my field, the person who believes they possess me will immediately be in conflict. And so that it's about understanding that any attachment in form creates that disruption, that turbulence in energy. Take that up to a nation believing they own something, then another nation believing they need that. And of course there's going to be conflict. That's how wars are fought. So conflict at all levels is caused by an attachment. But you've just said you're a believer in oneness. With oneness, you can't actually have attachment because attachment is external.
Yeah, attachment's possession.
Exactly.
And I saw this. I was reading through this thing the other day, and there was a line in there, and it said, if you put equality before freedom, you will have neither. You will have neither one. And I went, oh, that sounds right. What does that mean? And I just went through the same thing you did, and I went like, okay. And you see a lot of it today. Like, we're going to create affirmative action, and that's probably not a great example, but in other words, you create this set of rules to bring an equality, which is then suppressing and restricting somebody else. So you're immediately in this field of distortion, and you don't have either. Where you just go back to the oneness thing and the merging thing, and that you're talking about, and it's there is no discussion. It's an all or nothing proposition. And the way I look at it is, if I take a step back from something because I can't handle it now, I know, and I say to myself, I know I'm coming back to this, and hopefully it'll be in this life. But the idea is that if I can come together in any situation and walk away with as close to balance or equilibrium as possible, then that's kind of my goal. Is like, even if it's not a great situation, I try to just leave as much neutrality as possible, which means I see them as me, or I see it as me, or I see it as God, or whatever you want to call it. But of course, I think a lot of this stuff is coming to the surface because of the speed of the transformational shifts that are occurring. And I know we talk about this every time we come on, but 2022, especially this month, really feels like the great squeeze. Like, I mean, it's really quite profound on the body, the mental, the emotional. For some people, everybody goes through it differently. But I'm just curious, because I know you're very dedicated in your relationship with yourself, with your partner, with your family, with your passion, which some people call work, purpose, and I know you're on it as best as we can be, day in, day out, day in. Have you had anything that just really stands out for you in 2022, particularly this month? Are you feeling this succession of shifts, and what's your trip been like?
My trip's been really deep. And obviously we've just had here the full moon in Leo, and I'm a Leo. And I bet there's a lot of people that listen, a lot of your audience that know astrology far better that would have picked me as a Leo straight up. But I just came out of a workshop that I ran. It was the final one of a 12-month program, and it finished on Friday. And I came out of it. It was a really massive stepping up for me to step back into my heart space at even a deeper level in facilitating, just because of the people that were there and my relationship to these specific people. And I came into this really amazing place where I could literally feel a unification with my ego to the point where it no longer dominated me. It was, I'm just in this heart space and living from it. And I'll use words that really don't describe where it's coming from, but I did not care about anyone else anymore, in that I didn't require validation from the external. And I could give myself in love and witness people to the next level. And this lasted for 2 days, and my mum's just been visiting. And I haven't seen mum for 14 months because of the shenanigans that's been going on. And anyway, mum always, she's so beautiful in that she, her presence quite regularly sparks healing within me. And I then fell out of this because of some altercations that I actually had a fall. I slipped on a slippery step, and in the fall, I completely surrendered to the fall and came crashing down on these steps. But I didn't physically hurt myself because I'd surrendered to the fall, so there was no rigidity in my body. But my consciousness was disassociated. I actually shocked myself out of my body, which then psychologically and emotionally created this vulnerability that I went into. And so Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I was dealing with this wound of the feminine at a deeper level, because I witnessed some external women in my life, and I saw them. I saw the victim consciousness. I saw the passive aggressiveness. I saw the rage in them that they weren't willing to own, that they were pushing onto everyone else. And I saw the manipulator energy, the feminine, dark feminine manipulator energy really, really present. And I felt rage deep. I felt like I grabbed it and I stabbed my heart with it. And like, I've done so much work in the dark feminine, and I love the darkness. It's like, I know it's, the mystics will often say the light emerges from the dark and will always go back into the dark. The dark is the only constant, it's the only immortal. But the point of it, I was just really intrigued as to why it's there. And then my mother's obviously here as well. So I then started to wind down through this process of psychologically witnessing the wound of raging because I felt invalidated by the feminine and I felt wrong. If I was wrong, therefore I would be rejected. I needed the feminine. I was addicted to the feminine. Why am I addicted to the feminine? Because I'm not receiving the feminine in my heart space on my own. And it was then all of my rage was actually all about allowing myself to open my heart and receive the feminine. And then the question is, the realization dropped. As a young man, I was raised under the manipulative feminine in a lot of energies from a lot of different women that were in my field at the time. And I chose that so that I could actually immerse my consciousness into the dark feminine and then stand up. And as a softened, open-hearted, strong, masculine, witness the dark feminine and look her in the eyes and say, I fucking love you.
Yeah.
No matter what you fucking do, I fucking love you, but I'm not going to fucking move. I am here. This is my role. Yeah. And you can't hurt me anymore because I don't play that game. But at the same time, I'm just opening and softening my heart space. So I'm actually softer, but so much stronger from the experience.
Yeah.
And we've talked about this once before. This is just another spiral in my evolution, realizing that I'm on the planet as of service to the feminine. And then the Gnostics actually believe that. So many traditions actually believe that we're actually created not by father, but by mother.
I totally agree with that. Absolutely, 100%. And it resonates what you said, because we all have had our journeys. And of course, talking to Kirsty was a different experience because, you got two different genders, and it was very fulfilling, expansive. I I've gotten a lot of messages about it, that particular show. But like now talking to you, you know, like for me, it was, so we have this journey, let's say as a man, just to keep it in context, with your shadow. And even last night, I remember reviewing last night when I was communing last night, I remember seeing all these different things that happened. And I was both the human and the soul. And the human, I was able to kind of observe and feel the human feelings about different things, and mostly dark things, or what would have once been considered dark things. And there was just this clarity, a recognition of a new state of being, which is like both of these have merged, and now we can see that for what it is, and so on and so on. But what I'm trying to say is, as a man, having this interaction one way or the other with your own shadow, or with the shadow of the masculine, and how there had to be these levels of shedding the shame and the blame and the guilt and all that stuff, right? The anger. And then you have this new appreciation and understanding and relationship with shadow, you know? And then, like, listening to you reminds me of my own kind of, I guess, journey. And again, I had many women growing up. You know, I had a healthy number of sisters, aunts, grandmothers, great grandmothers, stepmothers, you know, step grandmothers. I mean, it was just a lot. And, but getting to the point where I treat the shadow of the feminine as I've treated the shadow of the masculine. A lot of times I find that, you know, when I change something in myself, there's immediately evidence of a change in my external, as like begets like. But what I had noticed was I wasn't applying, and it was just because I didn't know. I mean, there's no harm, no foul, but I mean, for anybody, but I was not applying the same practices and principles to my relationship with the masculine as I was a feminine, right? Kind of like your parents, you know, like everyone's a people and you can kind of like bring them all to the same place. But if it's your parents, you forget they're just people. They just happen to be your parents. So they have this higher standard, or you hold them out a little bit further because it's built in. They're your parents, so they should do this or they should do that. But I just found that there was a time that came when I went, you know, wait a minute. I'm not, I can either continue to have this relationship with the shadow of the feminine and be and react and be charged, which is like beating my head against the wall because this is the way it's always been. Or I can look at it and look for what I have found in my own shadow as a masculine and with the insight I have as a masculine. And even though I don't have the insight yet, let's say, of the feminine, I do have history and experience, and I do have the same track record where if I went like this with the masculine, then it always ended up, you know, in a total F up. And same with the feminine. But once I reached this equilibrium with the masculine, soon after I started to go, wow, I actually love, more than anything, I love her shadow. That's the goal. Like even if I'm not right, what is right? But even if my perception is off, the very fact that I perceive a shadow, or if I'm right and I see a shadow, and I don't leave that burden on her, so to speak, but I bring it into myself, it becomes the greatest material for my self expansion. But I think it's a really good point that you're kind of bringing up for me and for others. I think is that there are two separate parts of us, and they are different. And if you're looking through the eyes of a man versus not being able to look through the eyes of a woman, and vice versa, then it is a different set of dynamics. But they do come to the same place in terms of the compassion and the love for the shadow, regardless of gender, and then what that offers once you get to that point.
It's a really good point you raise because people look at the yin and the yang, the dance of the masculine and the feminine, but they forget the white circle and the black circle within the white and the black, which actually talks of the masculine feminine element and the feminine masculine element. And if you want to read more about this, if people are interested, Richard Tanas is a really great scholar, astrologically and everything, and puts everything really, really succinctly. And I don't want to go too much into that, but it's really, once you get deeper into it, you go through the wounding of your mother and the father, and that's really the inner child stuff. It's still, it's still like teenage work when you're doing inner child work. When you're doing the really, really, really deep stuff, you go right back through your physiological inner child to your primal inner child. And like I was working with a lady in the last workshop, and she needed to go primal. And so like I get down, she goes down onto the floor, I get down at her level, and then I throw my energy into the alpha. And I stand, because it's a dance. She needs to own a feminine in the presence of a deep masculine. And yeah, sure, the energy is so intense. There's sexual energy there. There's rage there. There's everything. But the thing is in the healing process, she needs the space held for her, and that's the masculine that does that. And so I'm alpha, and I'm witnessing in the process. I'm also witnessing the group, and witnessing to ensure that, if necessary, I energetically shut down and push out anything which will disrupt the cauldron which she's allowed herself to create. And so my role as the masculine is to protect that cauldron, to hold space for that cauldron. And she just beautifully went through this process very, very much on her own, just needed a couple of promptings, etc. And that's that dance where you can go really primal. But the other thing that I wanted to mention and talking about is something I really witnessed in myself. One day, Kirsty said to me, Kirsty, for those who don't know, is my wife. And actually, I can't call her my wife anymore. I don't agree with that archetype. But the point about it, she witnessed me about 6 years ago. And I was 6 years into my healing journey from post-traumatic stress and depression and almost taking my own life. And she goes, when are you going to stop thinking that every time something comes up, you need to go deep into meditation for 3 hours, put yourself in a stress position, into pain, and meditate right through it? Why does it always have to be so massive for you? Why can't you realize that sometimes you're just hitting a little bump in the road and you'll be over it in like 30 seconds? Why do you have to make it like a mountain? And no, babe, you don't understand, okay? Like, everything is a mountain because I was so dark and so bad. So I need to do this stuff. In other words, James, you need to inflict more pain on yourself because of shame and guilt about how much pain you allowed yourself to inflict in the first place, and then what that did to the rest of your people around you, the collateral damage. So the shame and guilt was still demanding that I hurt myself in the healing journey. Now my understanding of collective unconscious and personal conscious is just really, really pivotal, because when I do emotional clearing, I can get myself really, really clean. But the divine then asks me, because I've mastered emotion, to step up and help the collective process emotion. So often I will then be in process and I'll go, okay, first question, is this mine or is it not mine? So I have to ask a binary question, is this mine or not? And if it's not, then I'm delving in the realm of the collective, which means that I can engage or not engage consciously. And I then pull back self-authority in this healing, energetic healing journey. And what I'm witnessing with a lot of people is that have done a lot of work is they don't realize that they've come to this place where, dude, you're seriously amazing. Like, you've done so much awesome work. Just realize now that you've been asked by the divine to actually step up and help healing. But this isn't yours. So don't take this personally, because if you take it personally, you're going to re-wound yourself. And so just step back and allow the divine, like literally surrender to the divine. You mentioned freedom before. There's an old adage, the more healing and closer to the divine you get, like initially, you want freedom. For a man, initially, if I don't have freedom, my wings are clipped and I'll fight you. I will fight you to get my freedom back. But the more I surrender and align my personal will with the divine will, the more I gift my freedom to the divine, so that I become one in union and service, in this divine union of service of my being into the external world. And part of that I know for me, because I've been able to master emotion to the place I have. Notice I use the term master, not control, but master the emotion to to the level I have is this is a gift that the divine has given my very being. So engage the collective unconscious consciously so that I can help humanity in its own way.
If you want to.
If I choose to.
Yeah, that's profound. Because you see, and you know, I know that everything isn't the same for everybody. And in the area of, let's say, practitionership, you know, of energy work, there's a lot of different stuff out there. There's a lot of modalities. There's just all kinds of stuff. But one of the things that seems to be, you know, pretty uniform is, are you cured, or I'm going to cure you, or you're going to come into alignment. And I notice people that kind of hold on to a story, right? Like the biggest trauma. Like for you, it would have been the roadside bomb, maybe, you know, or anything that whatever that was part of, you know, because I know your father was in the military and so on and so on. So I know there was a lot of stuff involved there, but you're making me understand. Well, let me just back up a little bit. So I started to go, okay, wait a minute. Who am I to say anything, first of all? Because in the spectrum, maybe they went from, you know, here to there. And maybe in the spectrum, I went from here to there. And I'm sitting here making a judgment based on the fact that I think my pain was, or my experience was worse than theirs. You know, that might be a frame of thought. But so I started to accept. I thought, well, maybe they have hit nirvana. Maybe this is where they want to live in this frequency for whatever they're doing or whatever they will be doing purpose-wise. And now that you explain this, I bet you that there's a lot of them that, because the same feelings are reoccurring, they think it's theirs and it's not. Or it could be the other way. They think they've cleared it and they haven't. See? So it's kind of like, and I think now that I hear this from you, I think I've seen both.
Yep.
Because you do see, because one thing that scares the shit out of me from my own mouth to me, or if I hear it from somebody else, I don't like, you know, just poo-poo it away, is that, hey, I've cleared that. I am not that. I'm a ballsy soul, but I am not ballsy enough to say to the universe, I have cleared this and that and this and that. I'm not. And I could be clear, but I'm not taking that stance, because I like what you said. You're not control. It's not control. It's master. Or I would say it's not a controlling pattern. A controlling pattern to me is, I cleared this. And, you know, and we're mastering is, I'm mastering this. Like you said, if the divine is going to salute you and put something before you, and in its unconditional love frequency, say, I'm not attached, James, because that's how the universe works. You have the capability to take this on for the collective if you choose. Okay? It's up to you. All right? That's cool. I'm good, you know. But by the same token, it might say to me, you have cleared enough to be given this opportunity, which is yours. Right? Like, so I can see how I would have recognized that on one hand, but not until you explain this on the other hand. And I think that would actually be very helpful to people, many people, and many of them, I think, are practitioners, because they tend to be the ones who went deep and developed different things for themselves that then become shareable, right? But I think that's a great insight, because I hear people talk about this all the time. They're like, well, I have to figure out if it's mine or yours. And I wanted to interrupt you, but you were talking. I didn't want to interrupt you and say, well, how do you know? Like, I don't know that. I'm like a rookie when it comes to figuring out, is this me or is this someone else's? Maybe I just don't think about it, but I know it. I get affected by it, and I certainly know that it's what you're talking about is very real. And I think it would be. I haven't seen a lot of people talk about it. What did you say?
Do you want to find out?
Yeah.
Okay, pick something in which you're not quite sure whether or not it's yours or someone else's. Don't worry about telling me it. Just pick something.
Don't tell you?
Don't tell me.
Okay. Let me think here. Okay, let me think. Let me just get it in my head. All right, so okay, I got it.
So I'm going to ask you a binary question, which has a yes or a no answer.
Okay.
And I want you to feel the first response you get. Is this mine or someone else's? First answer was?
Someone else's.
Yeah, I felt that straight away.
Mm-hmm.
So
you did.
Yeah. You're my brother, mate, and it's very easy to connect to
you. Yeah. Okay.
So it's a binary question. Yeah.
Right.
So whenever I'm sitting in it, I just clear my mind for a moment and I go, is this mine or someone else's? And I've got to feel the first answer. And then watch my head try and say, no, but this, that, and the other. Yeah, that's the head. Okay. See, I'm just being guided.
I got you. So this would be similar to, I guess, I know Morgan does muscle testing. So like, I never really associated the word binary with a yes or no question, but I guess that you can't get any more binary being two, right? Two different. So I guess like when she does muscle testing, it's really kind of a yes, no, right? I mean, I know what she does. So it's like, she'll go through letters and it'll be yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. Yeah. Cool.
It's really important. Sylvia just put something in the comments. She said, the second question, if it's mine, how much of it is mine? So quite often what people will do when they muscle test or they binary question is they'll take that moment in time and they'll say, now it's doctrine. Like, for instance, a person's looking at their diet, they ask a binary question, does this food nourish me or not? And it gets a no. So then they'll say, okay, so I remove this food from my diet. No, stop. A binary question or any form of divining is relevant momentarily. So it's relevant in this moment. So if you then realize that, cool, this is mine. So for instance, yep, this emotion is mine. So I go into the emotion and I do my healing. Now I'll get a lesson. When I've done my forgiveness and my healing always ends in forgiveness of self, because forgiveness brings the redistribution of energy. Yeah. And so shame and guilt are then left, or anger, sadness, fear, shame and guilt have all been dissipated back to where the universe can do its greatest good with them. And I come to this place, it's not an emotion when you truly forgive, it's a heart state. And the heart state will be something like love, compassion, gratitude, honor, humility, something like that. And you really feel it here, and the gift will be presented, and the gift is a lesson. And the lesson has to be twofold. It must be self-orientated. The lesson, say you had a trust issue. Well, I just trust too readily. I just trust people too much. No, stop. That's blaming other people and an externalization. You haven't got the lesson yet. So the lesson must be self-orientated. And then the second thing is it must be growth orientated, because it's the natural evolution or spiral of the universe is to grow. So if I want to go from, I did a video on Facebook on this the other day, to go from a loop to a spiral. The spiral is a natural motion of the universe. So you'll never, ever be at the same place in the universe. A loop is simply psychological, and it links me in, and it's done because I've lost my connection to the broader perspective of life. And a loop will be, I'm back here again. I've done the same thing. How do I always find myself in this position? It's because I haven't got the lesson. I will circle around to the same energy, same situation, but it will be different. It will be the same situation in different clothes, or it'll be different nuances of the energy for me to actually see, heal, and then integrate, for the spiral then to continue, so that I can actually witness this within myself, integrate it, and then continue on my spiral. But if I have any attachment to, you beautifully mentioned story, if I have an attachment to a story or a narrative, I can't fully heal, because I'm locked in space-time. And space-time and that construct hold me firm into a loop. And so therefore I will get depressed. I will get anxious, because anxiety is, I'm not allowing voices to speak to me, which is what anxiety is all about. So then if I let myself and I surrender, go back to that fall I had where I surrendered, I was sat into 2 days asking myself why I fell on the last step, why I slipped, why my feet came from under me on my last step. And I couldn't get the lesson, because I dissected the moment, and I was going, I slipped, I was on the last step. I was in runners. What was I thinking about before? Stop, James, stop. You're trying to analyze the situation. You can't get the lesson there. Drop into the fall. So I dropped into the fall and I surrendered to the fall. And then it was, I didn't hurt myself because I surrendered to the divine. That was my lesson. Not that you slipped on the last step, James. You've got to remain focused. You've always got to remain focused. Stop bloody doing. No. That wasn't my lesson. It was, you surrender, my brother, and I've got you. And it doesn't matter if you fall, because everything will be okay.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Complete different thing. And that's where I've been able to bring myself. So we just covered a shed tin of stuff. For those who are computing all that, firstly, binary questions are momentary things, momentary in space time. If you're using divining or binary questions or kinesiology testing, everything, and you're witnessing yourself or food or healing or whatever, always continually ask that question moment by moment, because once you've moved through that emotion, you'll then get it. Cool, that emotion is no longer mine. I'm now stepping into the collective. Right now, I don't want to, because I don't need to. I'm going to engage my practical life right now instead of my healing journey. So I'm going to go engage spiritually in my practical life. I'm not going to bring the collective unconscious in now. So I will do that at another time, because the divine has gifted me and asked me to do this. So I'll do that on Thursday at 2:00, and I'll go back into the collective unconscious. I'll ask my kinesio, I'll do my testing again. Yep. And I can now assist the greater divine heal that, or whatever you want. But remember, any divining is a moment by moment thing, used perfectly, and we just gave you a demonstration of how to use it.
Yeah, that's interesting. I was watching a video. Go figure, no mistakes. And it was about the Appalachia region of the United States, which is a on the eastern side of the country. It's a long mountain range, strip of mountain ranges. So they have a very distinct people there. They live in very hard conditions and have for many, many years. I mean, they live in remote areas. They get a pail to get their water from the well. I mean, it's some very, and it was actually about mountain witches, mountain witch doctors, herbal doctors, and so on. And so the guy was, I guess he's made a channel for a while, and he just does different things about the region, because it's a very unique region. But he was talking about the same thing. I'm realizing this, and he was doing the divining rods.
Yeah.
Right. And he was talking about this. He was basically using the same technique. And he was not somebody who was born into it. So through studying and stuff, he just decided one day to clip a coat hanger, and create two rods. And he started utilizing it to not just to find water, but to find answers.
Mm-hmm.
But also in his case, which I guess applies, he because he's in the woods, he was utilizing nature too, right? I mean, it was all like one thing. So I guess it's the same thing that you're talking about. And as I watch her, because I've seen her, be rocking back and forth, and and I don't really get into this stuff, but I do get into the information because she'll share it with me, and so I'm familiar enough with it to see that it's always just, is it this or that? Is it this or that? Is it this or that? And that's a pretty
all divining is a language of communion with the universe.
Yeah.
With the divine. So, and I asked a farmer who is massive into biodynamics and everything like this, which Rudolf Steiner started, and very energetic, and he knows dowsing and everything like that. And I said, "Can you teach me dowsing?" He says, "James, you already do it." And I'm going, "No, I don't. I don't have my rods." He says, "Dude, you're completely missing the point of dowsing." He said, "You already do it. You ask binary questions, you tune into energy, and the energy guides you in what you do. So just master that skill, and then you'll find the cross-pollination of that skill." So any binary question using pendulums and stuff like that, or your rings and tying them into, I can't even pull that off right now, but putting cotton and stuff and just asking questions, it's really easy to do. Anyone can do it. Just you've got to make sure, one, you purify yourself at the time, because your question, it has to be clear, and can I eat this food is not a good question to ask over food, which the person reminded me of the other day, because the simple answer is yes, you can eat it. A different question is, will this food nourish me in this moment? It's a very different question. But I've got to set the pendulum, or I've got to set the yes, no. And to do that, I must purify myself. And the ancients, like ancient monks would always say, one must sanctify before one's illuminated. In other words, they go into deep prayer and cleansing and often flagellation and all this to attempt to sanctify or purify themselves, and then sit in this open space to receive the word of God, or the illumination, as they would say. That's culture wide. You know, the more one can in our leadership, like our leadership model, it's not a model, sorry. Our leadership philosophy of harmonic leadership, it's underpinned by three concepts: purify self, unify team, and then amplify effect. And on Sunday, I was sitting in meditation, and I literally had this chocolate bar form across my solar plexus in my mind. Now, it wasn't a chocolate bar; it was a bar of ecstasy. And it was sitting there, and I'm going, okay, so, and the first thing, the mantra that dropped into my head was purify ecstasy, because ecstasy is so powerful, it can go anywhere. So I'm purifying the ecstasy. And then the next words dropped into my head, unify with the ecstasy. And my mind goes, this is too corny, James. Like, you're just pulling in the harmonic leadership stuff that you're talking about now. This is wrong. And I put that to the side and I said, okay, I'm going to explore it. Why would that have dropped in my head? So I've gone, and it said, unify with my being. So instead of the ecstasy being a feeling external to me, it was calling me to actually bring it and receive it completely in every morsel of my being. And once that had happened and settled, then the mantra dropped, now amplify ecstasy. Amplify, because I've purified it, I've become one with it, and now I can amplify it in its most harmonic way. Without those first two steps, I'm liable to turn something up on steroids, which can cause a lot of damage and collateral damage, etc. But if I go into self and I purify myself and just ask to be purified, and so therefore I'm setting my highest intention, I'm then unifying that with my very being. My very being will then want to gift that to the world, because that's why I'm here.
Far out, dude. Man, you must be like when you run into the Aboriginals, you must be like a breath of fresh air to them. Because I would imagine they get a mixed batch with non-Aboriginals, but you really tuned in and well researched and well versed. They must really pick up on that, you know. It's good seeing you again.
You too, my brother.
I feel
Still
the
got that spot
energies,
at the campfire.
dude. I'm working with the universe in a way I haven't ever before. That's all I can say, and it's very recent. It's very recent, and last night was huge. Last night was just we had a nice session with some friends. It was incredible. But then when I connected by myself that night or last night, after having a pretty cool night the previous night, I started to really gain some insight. The reason I'm mentioning this is because it has to do with movement, and it has to do with uh, in the physicality doing things that have been considered impossible or supernatural. And I just feel like that, like even this conversation, as much like practical, uh, processes and wisdom that it has, it also has this link to the Aboriginals and the Indigenous and the sacred wisdom of the ages, and that's kind of where I'm coming to. I feel like that. I'm just not. I don't want to play in this old playground anymore. So that visiting Australia, or not visiting, and coming to Australia, regardless of Morgan comes here first or what other circumstances may have, it's a big target in these communions, not out of any personal desire for any certain thing, but just there's this knowing there, which I've always known, actually since I met her. But yeah, I'm coming to the campfire. I'm going to get a caravan, so I can come whenever. I can go out to the outback. Or maybe I'll try the wait. I'll try the bush first. Maybe I should go bush then outback.
Yeah, that'd be nice. Love you a long time, my brother.
All right, man. You take care. I'm gonna go get horizontal.